Long ago, in the quiet village of Ndemu, there stood a great baobab tree. Its trunk was so wide that 10 grown men holding hands could barely surround it. The tree was old, older than the village itself. People whispered that the baobab could talk, but no one dared to listen too closely. They said it only spoke the secrets of the dead, and those secrets could destroy anyone who heard them. Under the tree's shade, the villagers gathered during the day, telling stories and laughing. But at night, the tree stood alone, surrounded by silence. No one dared to go near it after sunset. One sunny afternoon, a curious boy named Oba sat near the baobab. Oba was different from the other children. While they played games or helped their parents, Oba loved to explore and ask questions. His favorite spot was near the baobab, even though his mother warned him not to stay there for too long. "Oba," his mother said, "the baobab keeps the whispers of the dead. If you listen too hard, those whispers will follow you." "But Mama," Oba replied, "how can a tree talk? It's just a tree." His mother sighed and shook her head. "It's no ordinary tree, my son. Promise me you won't go near it at night." Oba nodded, but his curiosity burned brighter. That night, when the village grew quiet and the stars filled the sky, Oba tiptoed out of his family's hut. The moonlight bathed the baobab in silver, and the tree seemed to hum softly like it was alive. As he got closer, Oba heard something, a faint whisper like the wind passing through leaves. But this whisper carried words. "Who's there?" Oba called, his voice shaking. The whisper grew louder. "Oba, Oba." His heart pounded, but he couldn't move. "What do you want?" he asked. "The truth," the voice replied. "Will you listen?" Oba swallowed hard. "Yes." The whisper became clearer. "Long ago, a great betrayal happened in this village. The secret lies buried beneath me. If you find it, you will bring peace or destruction." Oba stepped back, his hands trembling. "What betrayal? What secret?" The baobab's voice faded into silence, leaving Oba with more questions than answers. The next morning, Oba couldn't stop thinking about the baobab's words. He decided to tell his best friend, Ayo, about what he had heard. "You actually spoke to the tree?" Ayo asked, his eyes wide. Oba nodded. "It said something about a secret and a betrayal. I think we need to find out more." "But what if it's dangerous?" Ayo whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Oba frowned. "Then we'll be careful. But don't you want to know the truth?" Reluctantly, Ayo agreed. Together, they decided to dig beneath the baobab to uncover the secret it spoke of. But as they began their search, strange things started happening in the village. One morning, the village elder, Babatunde, fell sick suddenly. His sickness came with strange dreams, and he kept muttering, "The past is rising." The villagers whispered that the baobab was angry. Some believed it was because someone had dared to disturb its peace. Others said the tree was protecting something dangerous. Oba and Ayo knew they had to move quickly. The whispers from the baobab grew louder every night, almost like a warning. But what scared them the most was that they weren't the only ones hearing the whispers anymore. Children began waking up in the middle of the night, crying about strange voices. Animals in the village started acting strangely, refusing to go near the baobab. And then, one evening, Oba's mother came to him with fear in her eyes. "Oba," she said, "I heard it. The tree spoke to me. It said you are waking something that should remain buried. Stop this, my son, please." Oba's heart sank, but he was more determined than ever. The tree's whispers weren't just calling to him, they were calling to the entire village. He had to uncover the secret, no matter the cost. As the days passed, Oba and Ayo dug deeper beneath the baobab. What they found shocked them. A bundle of bones wrapped in an old cloth, buried with a small, rusted knife. But the moment they touched the bones, the ground beneath them began to shake. The whispers grew into screams, and a cold wind swept through the village. The baobab seemed alive, its branches swaying wildly, even though there was no breeze. Oba and Ayo stared at each other, fear etched on their faces. They had uncovered the secret, but had they brought peace, or had they awakened something far worse? The screams from the baobab echoed through the village, and people rushed out of their huts, shouting in fear. Oba knew there was no turning back. He clutched the rusted knife tightly in his hand and whispered to himself, "What have we done?" Oba and Ayo stood frozen as the earth beneath them trembled. The villagers rushed toward the baobab, their torches lighting up the night. Their faces were filled with fear and confusion. What is happening? Babatunde coughed, his weak body barely holding up. What have you boys done? Oba swallowed hard, his fingers still gripping the rusted knife. We found something, Baba, he said. Bones, buried under the baobab. Gasps filled the air. The elders exchanged worried glances. The whispers from the tree grew louder, no longer speaking in hushed tones, but wailing like a lost soul. Oba's mother rushed to him and grabbed his arm. I told you not to go near that tree. Her voice trembled with fear. Do you know what you have done? Ayo stammered. It was calling to us. It said there was a secret buried here. We had to know the truth. But the truth was more terrifying than they had expected. The moment the bones were unearthed, a cold mist spread across the village. The night felt heavier, and the air smelled of damp earth and something else, something rotten. Then, the baobab's trunk split open with a deep cracking sound. A shadowy figure stepped out, its form flickering like smoke, its eyes glowing a deep red. The villagers screamed. Some ran back to their huts. Others fell to the ground, clutching their heads as if something unseen was pressing into their minds. Babatunde dropped his walking staff. His voice shook. No, it cannot be. He has returned. Oba's breath caught in his throat. Who has returned? Babatunde pointed a trembling finger at the shadow. The betrayed one. The figure turned toward Oba, its glowing eyes locked onto him. The whispers from the baobab stopped, replaced by a deep, raspy voice. You have freed me. Oba stepped back, his heart hammering in his chest. Freed you from what? The figure tilted its head. From my prison. Ayo grabbed Oba's arm. Oba, we need to run. But Oba couldn't move. He could feel the weight of the figure's gaze pressing down on him, holding him in place. The betrayed one took a step forward, and the ground beneath him blackened, as if burned. You seek the truth, child? Oba hesitated, but then he nodded. The figure's mouth curled into something like a smile. Then listen well. The village held its breath as the betrayed one spoke. Many years ago, before your fathers were born, this village was ruled by a great leader, King Ekane. He was wise and just, but he had a brother, Omiru, who envied him. Omiru wanted the throne, but the people loved King Ekine too much. So, Omiru devised a plan. The betrayed one's voice grew darker, filled with pain. He accused the king of sorcery. He said the king was using dark magic to control the village, and the people believed him. They turned against their own king. They dragged him to this tree, where Omiru drove a knife into his heart. The villagers shuddered as they listened. Some whispered prayers under their breath. But before King Ekane died, the betrayed one continued, he cursed this land. He swore that until the truth was known, the village would never have peace. And so his spirit was bound to this tree, whispering his story, waiting for someone to hear him. Oba looked at the rusted knife in his hand. This was the knife that killed him? The betrayed one nodded. And you, child, have awakened the curse. The cold mist grew thicker. The villagers began coughing. The air smelled worse, like something dead had been disturbed. Babatunde fell to his knees. Oh, great spirit, we did not know. Forgive us. The betrayed one's red eyes burned brighter. Forgiveness? His voice was like thunder. You betrayed your king. You let an innocent man die. There will be no forgiveness. The villagers screamed as the mist wrapped around them like grasping hands. The baobab groaned, its branches stretching unnaturally. Oba clutched Ayo's hand. We have to stop this. But how? Ayo cried. The curse is awake. The spirit wants revenge. Oba took a deep breath. He thought about the whispers, about the secret the baobab had kept for so long. Maybe there was another way. Maybe the truth could still save them. But he had no idea how much more danger was coming. The betrayed one lifted his hands. The sky darkened, and the village shook. You have woken me, he said. Now, you will all suffer. The ground cracked beneath them. The baobab's roots twisted like snakes. The screams of the villagers filled the night. And then the first person vanished. One moment, a man was standing near the fire. The next, he was gone, swallowed by the mist, then another and another. Oba's blood ran cold. If he didn't find a way to end this, there would be no one left by sunrise. But how do you stop a spirit that has waited generations for revenge? The answer, Oba feared, was buried even deeper than the bones beneath the baobab. And time was running out. The village was in chaos. The betrayed one's laughter echoed through the night as more villagers vanished into the thick mist. The baobab's roots stretched and slithered like hungry serpents, pulling people into the ground. Oba held tightly onto Ayo's hand. "We have to do something." Ayo's face was pale with fear. "But what?" "He wants revenge. How do we stop a spirit?" Oba clenched the rusted knife in his trembling hands. The whispers from the Baobab had led him here. There had to be a way to fix this. Then Babatunde spoke, his voice weak but urgent. "The curse was placed because of a lie. Maybe the truth can set us free." Oba's mind raced. "The truth. We have to prove that the king was innocent." "But how?" Ayo asked. "The people who betrayed him are long dead." Oba looked at the bones in the dirt. "Maybe not all of them." He turned to the betrayed one, his fear replaced with determination. "King Ekene, if we prove your innocence, will you let the village go?" The betrayed one's red eyes narrowed. "Prove it? How?" Oba took a deep breath. "Omiru accused you of sorcery, but where is the proof? If you were truly a sorcerer, would you have let them kill you?" The spirit's smoky form flickered. The wind howled, shaking the huts, but Oba stood firm. "You were a great king," Oba shouted. "Your people loved you. Omiru lied because he wanted power. But his betrayal did not just take your life, it cursed the village. Your people have suffered for generations. Is that what you wanted?" The betrayed one's form wavered. The mist hesitated. The villagers, huddled in fear, slowly raised their heads. Babatunde, still kneeling, whispered, "Great king, we were deceived. We did not know the truth. Forgive us." Other villagers followed, their voices trembling. "Forgive us." The betrayed one let out a deep, sorrowful sigh. "You say you were deceived, but does that erase what was done?" Oba swallowed hard. "No, but revenge will not bring back what was lost. Let the truth be known. Let the curse end." The betrayed one stared at the villagers, his red eyes dimming. Then he turned to the Baobab tree. For the first time, the whispers were clear. They were not words of anger, but sorrow. The voices of ancestors crying out for peace. The betrayed one reached out a smoky hand and touched the tree. "The truth is free," he whispered. The Baobab shuddered. Its massive trunk glowed faintly, and then, with a final sigh, the mist began to fade. The missing villagers reappeared, dazed but unharmed. The roots slithered back into the earth. The betrayed one's form began to dissolve. His red eyes softened. He looked at Oba one last time. "You are brave, child. You have done what generations could not." Oba watched as the spirit faded into the wind, his presence finally at peace. The Baobab stood silent. The whispers were gone. Oba dropped to his knees, exhausted. Ayo sat beside him, breathing heavily. "Did we really just stop a curse?" Oba looked up at the ancient tree. "I think we set a soul free." The villagers gathered around them, whispering prayers of thanks. Babatunde placed a hand on Oba's shoulder. "You have given Ndemu a new beginning." Oba smiled, but deep inside, he knew one thing for sure. This was not the end. Some secrets still waited beneath the earth. And one day, they might wake again. If you enjoy the story, please like and subscribe so that you would not miss the remaining story. See you next week, Friday.